The bike trip has begun. I'm winding down my day in my hotel room in the old part of Lübeck. What a beautiful city. So glad to be back here and have a little more time. I visited the European Hanseatic Museum. If you're ever here, so fascinating to see how the Hanseatic League got formed, and to learn about its history, starting back in the 12 and 1300s. So amazing how much trade was going on back then and how it was done. And then just had a nice walk through the city. So this is the eve of my departure on picking up the route tomorrow morning. I will put on here just a few flashes of interesting things I saw in Hamburg and today in Lübeck, and then put a little bit more about what I said yesterday about the impact of this trip on and how it's resonating with events in the world. And I'll read you a few things my mother wrote in her writings well before we were in the current situation. But while she was still processing, as I suppose she did her whole life, the events she experienced in the war and afterwards. So enjoy. Well, I had a nice time walking around Hamburg. This is in the St. Georg region, and then I saw this funny exhibit about to happen at the art gallery. Trains are such a great feature of Europe. Picked up my bike, the same place I dropped it off 2 years ago, and found a way to put it on a train. Lübeck has a really nice rail station. There's my hotel. And here are some shots of beautiful, beautiful Lübeck. Buildings dating back to the 12th, 13th, and 14th century or more. Find me in this shot if you can. I had dinner at a place called Kartoffelkeller, the potato cellar. Boy, was that yummy. And now let's listen to Mom. Here's some of what Mom wrote about what it was like to live in the war and under the Nazis. We would go to the theater till almost the end of the war, incredible as it seemed later. We would see a performance, and halfway through, the air raid sirens would sound and we fled to the bunkers. When the all clear sounded, it was usually too late to go back to the theater. We simply couldn't live in fear only. One had to pretend there was hope for life going on. For a long time, it was drilled into us by incessant propaganda that there would be a victorious outcome of the war. The alternative was unimaginable, a big black nothing. We were only dimly aware that other forms of life existed outside the fenced-in and controlled situation in Germany. 10 years old when the Nazis took over, it was their propaganda spiel, the only heard information, or simply education we got. Older, worried voices, later on vaguely heard, seemed threatening. The lid was kept down heavily by the police and those little people like block and watch wards who love to have little power which seems big to them. To the older people, it must have been much more depressing, like a noose dropped from nowhere, slowly being tightened. My uncle, husband of my mother's sister, was taken to a concentration camp in Oranienburg, north of Berlin. We were told he was sent to a sort of political schooling camp. He was not only Jewish, but also a socialist, maybe with communist leanings. He died there from an illness, my aunt was told. She was allowed to get his body and found signs belying that report. She didn't want or dare to talk about it. We found out about it all much later. Tante Rat told me before we moved to tell my father to vote for Hitler. He would get Germany back up into prosperity and its honor restored. I did not understand any of it and did not tell father about it. When I visited her maybe 6 years later, around 1936, she told me of strange things happening in the apartment house she lived in and next door. Trucks would come late in the day or after dark and pick up people who would not come back. She didn't tell more, but her enthusiasm for Hitler was not there anymore. But she probably was also aware that to tell or say too much might make me talk about it later to someone else, which I didn't because I couldn't understand, but thought it somewhat upsetting.